Thanks for being here for this week's episode of Economic News. So, China's economy has been making headlines, and I kind of wanted to get your take on it.
Yeah.
We always hear about China's crazy growth for years,
hmm
but things seem to be changing.
Yeah, definitely. There's been a lot of talk about a slowdown, and the latest numbers seem to back that up.
Yeah, their Q3 growth came in at 4.6%, which missed their 5% target, and that follows 4.7% growth in Q2. So it's actually their lowest quarterly growth rate in decades.
Wow.
Pretty significant.
Yeah, it is. It really makes you think about what this means for China as like an economic powerhouse. For the longest time, they were posting these huge growth numbers, seemingly unstoppable, but now it looks like they're facing some headwinds.
Yeah, so what are some of the reasons behind this slowdown?
Well, for one, consumer confidence is low. People just aren't spending as much.
Which is a problem when China's trying to rely more on domestic consumption to drive its economy.
And then the real estate market is a big factor, too. It's been struggling for a while. And that has a ripple effect across the entire economy. Fewer people buying homes means less construction, fewer jobs in related industries, and less overall economic activity. It's like a domino effect.
And then there's also the issue of exports. They slowed down sharply in September, with growth at only 2.4%. That's a far cry from the double-digit growth we used to see from China.
Yeah, it is. It's a sign that the global economic landscape is shifting. A lot of countries are facing similar challenges with slowing exports. So it's not just a China-specific issue.
It makes you think about how interconnected everything is.
Absolutely. What happens in one part of the world has consequences everywhere else. It's like a giant, complex web.
Okay, so given all of this, what's China doing about it? They must be trying to stimulate the economy somehow, right?
Yeah, they are. The government has taken some steps, like lowering mortgage rates to encourage people to buy homes. They've also reduced reserve requirements for banks, which basically frees up more money for lending.
But are those measures enough?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Some analysts think they need to do a lot more. They've described these measures as piecemeal, meaning they're small and targeted, rather than a big sweeping stimulus package.
Maybe they're trying to be cautious. I mean, a massive stimulus can have unintended consequences, too.
That's true. It's a delicate balancing act. They need to find a way to stimulate growth without creating new problems, like runaway inflation or unsustainable debt. It's a tough spot to be in.
It's interesting. The World Bank now classifies China. They consider it an upper-middle-income country now, rather than a developing country.
Yeah. That reclassification got a lot of attention. On the one hand, it's a testament to China's progress in reducing poverty, but it also highlights the fact that they still have a way to go. The World Bank estimates that about 17% of the population still lives on less than $6.85 a day.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even with rapid economic growth, it takes time to lift everyone out of poverty.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating to see how the World Bank is adapting its approach to China in light of this. They're moving away from large-scale lending and toward more selective engagement, focusing on areas like promoting greener growth, encouraging market reforms, and ensuring that the benefits of economic growth reach all segments of society.
So they're not just throwing money at the problem, they're being more strategic about it.
Exactly. They're trying to promote sustainable and inclusive growth, which is a much more nuanced approach. It's a recognition that simply focusing on GDP growth isn't enough.
It makes you wonder how all of this will play out in the long run.
Right. It's a really interesting time to be watching China's economic evolution.
Well, I'm definitely keeping my eye on it. I think what happens in China's economy has ripple effects across the globe.
Oh, for sure. In fact, global economic growth forecasts are already being revised downwards because of it. Banks are now predicting slower growth for the global economy in 2024, and China's slowdown is definitely playing a part in that.
So it's not just China's problem. It's a global problem. I've also been hearing about high interest rates in other countries. Could that be playing a role too?
Absolutely. High interest rates in many developed countries are making it more expensive for businesses to invest and for consumers to borrow. That can really put a damper on economic activity.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. What with the war in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East, do those things factor into these economic forecasts as well?
They do. Geopolitical risks, like those you mentioned, can disrupt global trade and supply chains, which ultimately impacts economic growth. And on top of all of that, the EU Commission is warning that U.S. protectionist policies could further harm global economic growth.
What kind of policies are they talking about?
Well, they're referring to the new tariffs proposed by President-elect Trump. Essentially, these tariffs are taxes on goods imported from other countries, which can make those goods more expensive for businesses and consumers here in the U.S. The concern is that this could lead to trade wars and ultimately hurt everyone involved.
So we've got China's slowdown, rising interest rates, geopolitical instability, and potential trade conflicts. It sounds like we're headed for a rough ride.
It's certainly possible. But it's important to remember that economic forecasting is not an exact science. There are always unexpected events that can influence how things play out.
That's a good point. The economy is a complex system. It's a lot of moving parts.
It is. Think of it this way. China's economy is like a giant ship that's slowing down. This slowdown creates waves that are felt throughout the global economy, impacting everything from trade to investment to consumer spending.
That's a great analogy. And it sounds like we're all on board that ship, whether we like it or not.
Exactly. We're all interconnected. And what happens in one part of the world can have a ripple effect across the globe.
So given all of this, what can we as individuals do?
It's important to stay informed about what's happening in the global economy
Right.
and how it might affect you.
Okay, what else do we be worried?
I wouldn't say worried, but definitely aware. Pay attention to economic news and how it relates to your own personal finances. It's also a good idea to diversify your investments, just in case one area of the market takes a hit.
That makes sense. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
But overall, it sounds like you're cautiously optimistic.
I am. Despite the challenges, there are also opportunities out there. And remember, the global economy has weathered storms before and come out stronger on the other side.
I like that perspective. So to recap, we've got China's slowdown, rising interest rates, geopolitical instability, and potential trade conflicts, all contributing to a less than optimistic outlook for global economic growth. But you're saying we shouldn't panic, just stay informed and be prepared.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to navigating complex economic landscapes.
That's a great takeaway. And speaking of knowledge, I think it's remarkable how much China has achieved in terms of poverty reduction. The World Bank highlights that nearly 800 million people have been lifted out of poverty in China since 1978. That's incredible.
It is. It's a testament to the power of economic growth to transform lives. But it's also a reminder that development is a journey, not a destination. There's still work to be done, both in China and around the world.
Well said. It's a complex situation, but I feel like I have a much better understanding of it now.
I'm glad to hear that. It's always fascinating to explore these economic trends and their global impact.
It really is. So to sum it all up, China's economic slowdown is a major development with global implications. It's got everyone wondering what this rebalancing means for the rest of the world.
Yes, and it raises so many questions. Will other countries step in to fill the gap if China's growth continues to moderate? How will this impact global trade and manufacturing in the long run?
And how will China itself adapt to this new reality? Will they stick with these smaller stimulus measures or eventually go big to try to reignite faster growth?
It's a fascinating situation to observe. China has been such a dominant force in the global economy for so long. It's hard to predict what will happen next.
I guess we'll just have to wait and see how it all unfolds. This is definitely one of those situations where we need to stay tuned.
Absolutely. The global economy is constantly evolving, and there are always new challenges and opportunities emerging.
Well, thanks for breaking it all down for me. It's given me a lot to think about.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure to discuss these topics.
And thanks to all of you for listening to this week's Economic News. Catch you next time.